Okay,
And,
go ahead.
okay. And then the second item is, we had talked months ago about satisfying both our own ordinance and the contract for the annexation agreement requiring us to set up an escrow account. That escrow is spelled out. I've got all the documents here if anyone wants me to reiterate them. But that, we had agreed to put the money for that escrow into a separate account and keep it separate from our general funds. And I became aware this week that that is not happening. So the escrow got set up, and there's $500 in it, and that's it. Nothing's happened to it. So the checks are still being written out of our general fund. Presumably, the money's still in the general fund because there's only $500 in the account. So I was wondering why that isn't happening, and under the circumstances with us having lost our treasurer, I understand that, maybe we need time to fix that. But I'd like that confirmation, and I'd like the commitment for that, because we set this up, or we agreed to this back in November, and we're in January. And I don't think it's that hard. I mean, I know the account was set up. I don't know why the checks are not being written, why the last notification we got, or status we got about that account was from Timothy McPhillips before he left, and he said in here that, and this was on December 13th, I guess, that the documents show that we have like a $52,000 outstanding balance that needs to come to us from Shodine in order to get current with our contract. So why is that not happening?
Mm-hmm.
Can
Do you want
anyone
to
speak to
respond?
that?
Mark?
Yesterday, Tracy Johnson came in and assisted me to write, what was the invoice, Tracy? 43,000 that we sent to Shodine and to Sally Estetz, their accountant, for 43 plus a 25 balance to keep the 25. And then this afternoon, worked with Tracy again and sent a second invoice to Shodine, Sally, for the item from Kleinthorpe and Jenkins related to the invoice that we just received this morning. And we sent that out this afternoon before this meeting started.
So will the funds actually be going into the escrow account? Or as of right now,
The checking account that was opened, yes, that's something I've had a discussion with the temporary,
Okay.
accounting help that we've got. And, he's new and there's a lot of issues to work through, but he's aware there's a problem. And I said, don't be shy in stating that to Therese, that we don't have those funds in the checking account, that it's a GL issue and you're still getting a handle on that. And
Well-
if we prove the money though is showing up and being reimbursed as we invoice Shodine. They usually take less than a week to review it and send a check to us. So the 43 plus the 25 went out yesterday. On Monday, we came in and done that, and then today we did a second one, because we received the invoice from Kleinthorpe
So
at 10 in the morning.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Trace.
So currently, the money is being held in our general operating account. So can I just get like some idea of, because I don't think this is necessarily a Russ issue. He's just came on board. This has been worked on for months, and he's only been working on this for a couple of, maybe a week or so. So the problem, he inherited the problem, but I just want assurances that will get figured out, and we start, doing it the way it's supposed to be done, and done through the escrow, like our contract and the code
I only
require.
had the preliminary discussion with him last Thursday on it,
Okay.
and he was like, you're gonna have to explain this a little more to me.
So today, I will put the Kleinthorpe and Jenkins back on to be paid 100%. But at the next meeting, if there's any more of these expenses that are supposed to be through the escrow, so we have 2 weeks to get at least some of this straightened out, I will start declining, or at least pulling them off of the warrant, because I think we've had plenty of time.
So essentially, you're asking staff to take a warrant and wait till we've invoiced Shodine and been paid by Shodine before we pay said warrant.
What I'm asking you to do is to follow the contract, which says that you put in the expenses that you're anticipating, you make the request from Shodine, just follow the contract. It says exactly how it should be handled. And so you make the request, the account is never supposed to drop below either $15,000 or $25,000.
25.
Okay, well, it's at 500 right now, so we haven't even satisfied that minimum requirement. But that's an easy one. You can send that request to Shodine very, very easily and say, at a bare minimum, we need to have this 25,000 in the account. So we haven't followed that.
That
either.
was done yesterday to get that straightened out.
Well, but this has been going on since November. So I'm just bringing it up to make the point that we've got to get it going. So I will put the Kleinthorpe and Jenkins back on to be paid at 100%, but then I still have a comment to make about the expense that is on your reimbursement for the $440 going to this HR 2U that wasn't approved at the, I mean, we haven't even approved that expense yet. We had talked about this at the last meeting, that you may have, approved a contract, but you have to do the budgetary item also. You have to do that part of it, and we haven't done that. And regardless of that, the expenses that you have and the invoice that you attached are for work that she did in December 1st through like December 31st. That predates any contract that we may have, I agree that the contract was properly approved, that still predates the contract. So why is she doing work before we've even approved a contract and approved the budgetary item?
Janet, go ahead.
I'm not going to try and explain things that should be obvious to anyone who was in the room when they happened. What I will try and clarify for everyone is that Trustee Hostensberger doesn't have a veto over any of these proceedings. So there was a consensus to move forward with the contract for HR2U, and we moved forward with that contract. My understanding is that contract was accepted within our existing budgetary framework, and this hair on fire nonsense about $440 is nonsense.
Go ahead, Therese.
So I'll just, the comment that it is my job to make sure that we're following our procedures. And the procedure is, if you have a new item that you're adding, we were adding a new position. This is not an item that we have an existing line item for on our budget. And it's a simple process. You just have to go through the process. We don't get to, I guess I take issue with, it's just $440. This is $440 of our, community's money, and we have to look at every $440 like it's our own, okay? And I don't spend $440 flippantly on my own bank account. I'm not going to do it for the village either. And so all I'm saying is we need to do the right process. And I think there's a strong argument to say that this was not approved. The contract may have been approved, but the expenditure was not. And we have to do, it requires, if we can't find a specific line item that says, HR services, then we just have to make one. And I'm not saying that we couldn't agree to that. We could agree to it, but it requires an ordinance and it requires an agreement of 4 of the trustees. We just have to follow process.
The 440 was, maybe you've forgotten, I was directed and said I could run that through the JMR Consulting, $10,000 for other services that is in my pre-contract before January 1st, and the direction was that it would be reimbursed after I incurred it through that JMR Consulting for that initial work by HR2U before we had it approved as a contract on the board agenda. That's how it came about, and that was the understanding that was given to me, and that's the direction I followed. Maybe you forgot that part.
Well, what direction?
In executive session regarding those issues that she worked on.
Okay, so I can pull out the IML book, but you can't do approvals and directives in executive session. We can talk about things, but if we want to approve an expenditure, you come out here and you do it in an open session, and you approve it in an open session. And if there's any confidential information that you've talked about in executive session, you just generalize what it is we're approving and why. But you don't avoid the process of coming into, I can tell you the page number. where it says right on there, there is no such thing as an agreement in closed session. We can have conceptual ideas, but you have to come out of closed session and you have to go into an open forum, let the public know what you're doing, and then you approve it. And then there's a process. I'm just asking that we please start following the process.
Anybody on this side right now? I'm going to take Nick and then Janet, yeah.
I'm just going to make a comment about this. So, in closed session, we're talking about employment matters. In your contract, it said that you had the ability to take on an expense like this without any consensus or approval of the board. And I don't think that it was us giving approval. It was a discussion and an agreement that this was the right path for the administrator to take for that task. I don't think that there was, at any point, was this a public, this was regarding employment matters, and it was appropriate for the closed session.
Janet, go ahead, and then we'll go back to Therese.
So that's one of the things we're going to talk about when we get to discussion about the way debate works. So the other really important issue for everyone to understand is that we did, in a subsequent meeting, have a vote, and we accepted the contract from Kathy Lampkin at HR2U. And there is all of this, I can't believe the machinations that are going on over this fairly small contract, which is intended primarily to keep us out of HR trouble because we keep getting into HR trouble. So we agreed to do this. The board passed it, and Trustee Husbensberger is just flat out wrong. We do not have to have a specific budget item that correlates to this contract. We merely need to have it covered under a existing budget item. So she can continue to, go on and on about it as long as she wants. The fact of the matter remains, there is a consensus on this board to pass this contract and pay this bill.
Go ahead, Therese, and
There's
then
one
tell me
last-
what your motion is then, yeah.
Yes,
go
there's
ahead.
one last issue with it as well, is I don't believe that it is Administrator Rooney's responsibility to also put these expenses through his own S-corp. He put this through his own S-corp. Now, that violates all kinds of conflict of interest, situations. It should not be going through his S-corp. I brought this up also and said I will not approve it going through anyone's S-corp. If she is a professional and has her own business, she should have either her own S-corp or another way for us to pay her. So there's multiple things wrong with this particular item. And I'm not debating whether or not it was a good idea or a bad idea to hire HR2U, and I've said this numerous times. But when we do these things, we have a budget that we have to look at, and we have to do things according to the budget. And I just adamantly disagree with the way some of my fellow trustees think that works. I think there's very strong case law and other things that we can show that say that you have to have the budget item approved. Either it has to be in an existing line item with some space, which that was never even, none of those details were brought up in the last meeting. So you need to have you need to identify the line item, and then you need to say, this is how much money we've got left, this is the amount of money that we're talking about spending. And then it requires 4 of us to vote. A budget item does not get voted through on a simple 3-vote majority. This is all over the IML. I can show you guys it in the book. I can show you it all over the place. But this is not something that I made up. It's something that we should be following. And I'm bringing it up not because of it's so much money or this $440. I'm bringing it up as we need to start following policy and doing these things the right way. We have a budget right now. We have a treasurer situation where we've got some work to do. We don't even know for sure what our finances look like because we've got some reconciliations to do. We've got some other work to do. So all that needs to be done. And then we can start making these expenses. But either way, I don't know how you take a contract approved, even if I admit that it was approved in January, for work done prior to that in a closed session. The topic of the closed session was accurate. Read the IML book. It says you cannot make decisions in closed session. You can talk about it, but you have to come out and you've got to agree then in the public forum, in the right setting, and we didn't do that.
Okay, what's your motion then, Therese? Let's see if we
My
can-
motion right now is I'm going to leave the Kleinthorpe and Jenkins alone. We're going to go ahead and pay that. But my motion is to approve payment to Mr. Rooney without the $440 until we can figure out how we're approving this contract and what we're doing with it. So my motion is to approve his payment without the $440.
Okay, do I have a second? Do I have a second? No? Okay, motion fails. All right. Okay, we'll move on.
You would ask for a motion to approve.
I'd like a
warrant
motion to
as presented.
approve the invoice to J.M. Rooney, as well as the invoice to Kleinthorpe and Jenkins as it stands.
And a second?
Second.
And so
Second
that
by
would,
Frank?
so that would be a motion to approve the warrant as presented.
Right.
then, Correct, yeah.
Correct.
Okay. And then roll call?
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Benetti?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Hassenberger?
Nay.
Trustee Muir?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. All right, move on to staff reports. We have administrator. We have our TIF update with SB Friedman.
Yeah, we know in your packet you had the TIF report, and the revisions are redlined, and then you have the schedule provided by Kleinthorpe and Jenkins Carmen Forte, and we have the slide deck that Mr. Dickerson is going to review. And for the public, this item is to discuss the possibility of establishing a TIF and we have to have a report from a TIF consultant, and that's where Jeff is going to walk you through the report, saying that we can establish a TIF under the following stormwater reasons to mitigate that. And then it starts the clock on the steps that it takes about 90 days, best case, to establish through the JRB to then make issues regarding south of 38. So Jeff, without any further ado, from SB Friedman, who's been our consultant that we've approved, last fall.
Can you check the microphone?
I think it's
Got it.
set. And Jeff? And if, it would probably go better if we can write down the slide number that he's on, that you have questions, and then ask your questions at the end. I thought that we had the cast was working.
I'm connecting right now. I'm reconnecting.
Ah,
Yeah, it worked. He just sat down and it,
he's doing it now, yeah.
Uh-oh. Doesn't look like that on my screen. Are we getting there? We're getting there, okay. Yeah, very good. It's thinking. Excellent.
It's cold outside.
Very good. Nice to see you all this evening. I am Jeff Dickinson. I'm a partner with it takes a second to render in some places, or anyhow. I'm with SB Friedman Development Advisors. We're an economic development consulting firm. I guess you know this, you signed our letter, but we do economic development consulting work for cities and developers around the country, and I'm happy to present a summary of the report that Mr. Rooney was talking about. I think you're all familiar, broadly speaking, with the boundary of the proposed TIF area. It's 583 acres. It's the orange line, basically, is the boundary of this proposed TIF area. As Mr. Rooney said, our job is to evaluate whether the area qualifies under the state law and draw conclusions about that and write that up in a report. And then the second part of the report is a redevelopment plan for the district, which defines per statute the parameters under which the board and future boards what they should intend to do with the district, and provides financial parameters for that 23-year period. This is almost entirely a vacant land TIF. There's a small area that is improved with the train station, as I think you all know. So from an eligibility perspective, we looked at this as a vacant land TIF. This is a summary of the TIF Act as to how vacant land can be found eligible. There's two different tests. There's a one-factor test and a two-factor test. This area qualifies under the one-factor test, and I'll explain how in just a second. This is a little bit about our methodology. We did do field work to document property conditions and I mean, frankly, to make sure it was vacant. You know, people want to put our eyes on that and make sure. We looked at historic property values. Most significantly, we also got a memo from H.R. Green, who is the village's engineering consultant, about stormwater runoff, which I'll talk about in a little more depth in a second. And we looked at your comp plan. The TIF Act requires that TIF plans agree with the comp plan. That's a basic premise of TIF. TIF is not making land use policy. It is a tool to implement land use policy that boards have already approved. So you already have a land use policy for this area, and this TIF plan conforms to that. So the one-factor test is that runoff from the area contributes to flooding in the watershed. I'll say it again. It's a pretty, whatever. It could flood. It does not flood. So that's one way it could qualify. The other way it could qualify is if runoff from the area contributes to flooding in the watershed. So the water hits the mostly fields and runs into a body of water that floods. That's what H.R. Green found. They found that all of the water from this vacant land flows into a body of water that floods. The Mill Creek watershed, to be specific. So, and the Johnson's Mountain Run, so watersheds. So there's two watersheds that the water goes into. So it's a one-step test. That is a true statement, and therefore the area meets the eligibility factor requirement under state law. There are a bunch of other tests, so you have to have the factor, and you have to also satisfy these. The area has to be more than 1 acre, 1.5 acres, I should say it is. There has to be a lack of private investment. Again, if you all know the land, there has been no private investment here. You know, it's a bunch of vacant land, basically. The land has to be contiguous. It is. As I mentioned earlier, the future plans, which are is a required aspect of the redevelopment plan, has to conform with the current land use policy of this village, and it does. If there were housing, there's some rules about that, but there isn't any, so that doesn't apply. And we have to estimate the date of the completion. TIFs last for 23 years on their initial life in Illinois without an amendment to the TIF Act, basically. So the estimated 23 years assumes that the TIF is approved this year. Obviously, as Mr. Rooney said, this is an introductory meeting. The TIF process is quite prescribed and quite open to public engagement. So this is a kind of an FYI meeting. Frankly, I don't usually present at this meeting. It's usually we show up later. We're happy to be here, but like usually this doesn't usually get a full airing in public. But I think that the village wanted to be, make sure everybody knew where everybody was when the process started from a policy or from a procedural perspective. So there are two other required public meetings: a joint review board meeting and a public hearing, and then actually three, the meeting at which the board would consider adoption. So there's 3 more bites of the apple, if you will, from literally in this room. Well, I guess the GRB meeting may not be here, but a public meeting that the public could attend. And this is sort of the, as I said, it's a kind of a pre-meeting, again, a good meeting to give people a heads up on what the plan says and the process going forward. As I mentioned, this is part 2 of our report, the plan. The objectives in the TIF plan are pretty flexible. 23 years is a very long time, and so we don't tend to get particularly prescriptive about what's going to happen. Even with a project that's sort of pending or sort of in the process, and we know you've been through a lot of discussions with Shodine about their plans for the land, but even then, 23 years is a long time, so we keep it pretty flexible. The plan will encourage the construction of new residential, commercial, open space, and right-of-way. You don't have to do all that, but you could. Foster the replacement, repair, or construction of public infrastructure. The absence of public infrastructure is fundamentally the challenge with this land, as I think you all know. But in 20 years, maybe you need to rehab it too. I think most infrastructure lasts longer than that, but you could if you wanted to. A future board could use TIF to pay to fix it. You could also renovate, and you have to provide for construction of stormwater management systems if you use the flooding factor, the so-called flooding factor, which we have used, so that's factor 3 or objective 3. These are all choices, and these are future decisions by the board, even after the TIF is created, help approve signage and landscaping and other things. You can pay for marketing of sites. You can pay for site preparation. You can pay for site assembly. So there's lots of things you can do, but as I say, creating a TIF district doesn't make you do anything. You just have a TIF district, and the future items is decision, action, spending of money is a separate set of decisions that comes separately. But this document limits what you can do, and the limits are not very many yet. They're the limits of state law, basically. We didn't try to narrow your power or future board's powers with the TIF plan, which is pretty standard. There's a budget. This can be a confusing item. It is not an obligation to spend. It is a maximum spend. So the TIF can only spend $90 million. It's a lot of money. So if a board wanted to approve $90 million and $1, that's not exactly true because there's some details in the law, but there's a soft cap on spending. Again, decision to spend is separate. We've got line items for all of the different types of spending, and we've weighted them to where we expect the money to go, but you have fungibility within a TIF budget. So, for example, we have $400,000 for payments in lieu of taxes. If that had to be $410,000 for some reason, as long as you don't exceed the cap, you can do that, you or the future boards. So it's a sort of a cap on spending. And again, it's sort of the maximum flexibility allowed by law so that future decisions are not constrained on the front end. You can always say no. That's always the board's prerogative to spend TIF money. And this is the future land use plan. It doesn't say a lot. Basically, it says it could be residential, it could be commercial, it could be parks, it could be utilities, it could be right-of-way. We know you've got entitlements in place. Commercial is in your comp plan, so to the extent that that makes sense, you could approve it and you could give it TIF money, but obviously you don't have to. So that's the thing that's, I think, mildly interesting about this. Otherwise, it's you're going to probably do what you expect to see, or what's going to get built here is what you expect to see built here. This is a little more built-out version of the process. The dates beyond today are really estimates. We've got to, as Mark said, finalize the plan. It's very close, but it's not final, so we've got to button up a couple of details. And then it goes on file with the clerk. When it goes on file with clerk, that's when the rules from the Act kick in, and there's specific dates and windows where these meetings have to be held. There's also letters that have to be mailed out. There's notices in the paper that have to go out, all within the prescription. I think the village attorney prepared a summary of that. Anyhow, those numbers get really screwed down once we have a filing date. So this is a rough estimate of when it'll come up for board consideration. You know, it looks like late April-ish. But again, these dates will move a little bit probably as we hammer it down. And that's the summary walkthrough. I'm happy to field questions.
Okay, anybody have questions for Jeff? Janet?
I understand you're not going to be particularly involved in how we fine-tune this budget. But I would like to try and understand some things, since I think you're the guy that understands this better than we do right now.
Sure, happy to help.
Well, and actually, we have engaged SB Friedman to help us review the pro forma that we get in the request from the developer.
Even better.
Yes.
So, out of a potential $160 million forecast, we've budgeted spending $90 million of that. Is that typical to leave that delta between what is forecast to be collected and what we're budgeting? That's my first question.
I apologize. The $160 million number, where did that one come from?
It's in the presentation.
Which slide was that?
It's all over it. 160 million that's anticipated to be collected over the 23 years.
EAV.
Oh, is that EAV? I'm sorry. Let me pull my report up. I don't want to misspeak.
So maybe I misspoke.
No, I'm
But-
sure you were reading something that's. Do you have the page number?
I think it's EAV.
Okay. Well, let me get there. That number doesn't stick in my head. I apologize, but I will find it.
The increment, Jeff.
If it's the growth in property values versus taxes, that could be it. I think that's.
Right.
But let me see if I can find it real quick before I start speaking to it.
Yeah, because there's a big change.
So if out of the 160 million, we're only budgeting 90 out of an abundance of caution or something, I get that.
Sure.
But I'm not sure that I understand it, so I
Yeah.
just wanted.
I apologize. Let me find the number and then I can make sure I know what you're talking about. I guess if I had the PDF, I could Control F, but I do not have the PDF, so you gotta wait. Sorry. Page 3? Thank you. Yes, so these are two different things. So the $160 million number is the estimated final taxable value of all property in the district. So that is 1/3 of market value would be the other way to think about it.
So not related to this budget particularly?
Correct. I mean, it drives the taxes,
But
but
not directly.
It's property value, not taxes.
So these are not, there's no equivalence between these two different numbers?
Right, there's a relationship, but it's not the same thing. That's right.
Fair. Okay. Of the $90 million, we have $40 million that's in a fairly big pot for assembly and other things. I was trying to get clarity, just in a quick sidebar here with the administrator, as to whether that included our contributions to the school district that have already been agreed to. And the off-the-cuff answer, obviously not well considered, but off the cuff at the moment, was, yeah, I guess sort of in that $40 million pot. We have 11 different taxing jurisdictions that levy in this area, and the TIF, preempts all of them by its nature, right? And so with the school district, we have agreed up front to accommodate their needs to have funding for the students that might occur in this district. But we've got, 10 other districts that are not necessarily accounted for yet. So I guess if I had a choice, I would like to see property assembling and site preparation costs split up into money that might actually be related to the developer and money that might actually go to the different taxing bodies in some future JRB process. And so maybe that's not right for us to try and slice and dice it that fine at this point, but there's a general concern about whether this TIF is being used to subsidize the work of the developer above and beyond what's necessary to make the development happen. And so in that spirit, I would like, if it doesn't jeopardize our process, I would like to see some segregation between the money that is intended to go to these various different districts, which we're going to come to some agreement with over the coming months, versus the money that might be going into the development process itself. And if that's not a reasonable ask at this point, that's okay. But that's what I'd like to see if it's possible.
So I think there are two things that you're talking about. One item is the statutory requirement that the village, in my view, this will be TIF-supported housing, and so far as there are new students, net new students living in these homes, the village is required to make tuition payments to the schools the first dollar. So as soon as the dollar shows up, there's some rules and formulas and things in that nature, but the tuition goes to the schools first. So that's sort of outside of the budget, I guess. That's just a requirement. It doesn't count towards the budget. It's just for every dollar, you got to pay tuition first, subject to the law. So that is safe, but it's not in here, I guess, because it doesn't have to be. And then two, taxing district capital costs. There's only $800,000 in there, but that is the other place that the village can make payments from the TIF to affected taxing bodies, insofar as there are impacts on those bodies. So you could, again, if there's a need to, I don't want to make up facts because I don't know the facts, but like whatever, build an addition to a school because there's all these kids, that would be a taxing district capital cost, and that would be allowed under this budget to make that payment, subject to everybody agreeing that that's the right thing to do. So you have the power to do that, if that helps.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Anybody on this side? No? Any other questions or discussion? No. All right. Anything else, Jeff?
No.
Okay.
Like I said, we'll finalize the report, and it'll go on file, and then I'll certainly be back to speak to you at the public hearing phase, I presume.
Okay, thank you so much.
And the clock, just so you make it clear, it doesn't start till we have the final report on file, available, and we'll put that by, attach it to the village webpage under community development as we have stuff on this annexation, and it'll be available at the front desk for any of the public to look look at or get a copy thereof. So it won't start till we have that final, and there's a little hiccup on the map to get the legal description on the actual TIF. That's the only,
That's the cleanup. at
That's
this
the
point, is just
cleanup that we
fix
wanna
the
be
boundary legal description, which is an important thing, but it's, you know, from a human perspective, it's an appendix, but from a legal perspective, it's very important.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on, we have our chief, James Levan, for the police report.
Thank you. Your December monthly police department report, 541 calls for service, 12 accidents, 98 citations, 1 arrest. Christina and I are currently working on the 2025 year-end review report that comes out. So hopefully by the end of February, that will come out to the board and to the community. So we'll get that taken care of. It's a pretty long process, includes a lot of stuff in there. Kane County Animal Control sent out their annual report for 2025 for all law enforcement agencies. We only used their services 4 times all of last year. That was for 2 dogs, 2 wildlife calls. Both dogs were reunited with the owners. Kane County Animal Control is a great service, but obviously there's a fee that's associated with us using it, so we always try to minimize that. So it's a sort of a kudos to AR Social Media, helping in reuniting owners with their pets to the residents, because they're great at holding on to pets until we can locate an owner. So that keeps our costs down and expenses to Kane County Animal Control. We're actually one of the lowest ones in the county for our usage for them. I'd like to go over a few calls in December specifically, and once I get to the end of it, you'll see why. But on December 10th, approximately 11 p.m., officers responded to the Circle K for a male subject threatening people. While officers were en route to the scene, they were updated that the male subject had removed his clothes, was standing in the middle of Route 64, and was attempting to be run over by vehicles. Thankfully, the officers were able to de-escalate the situation and get the subject transported by EMS with a police escort for a mental health violation. December 11th, approximately 8 a.m., officers responded to the area of Campton Hills Road and Country View Lane for a male subject walking in the road with shorts, no shoes. I remind you at this time when this happened that it was about 14 degrees outside without the wind chill. So the officers responded there. They were able to locate the subject. He was going through a mental health crisis. Officers were able to keep the subject calm, keep him warm, contact family and friends, and get him transported by EMS for a mental health evaluation. December 18th, approximately 6:45 a.m., officers were dispatched for a suspicious male that was in the area of Silver Glen and Burlington Road. When officers arrived in the area, they located a vehicle that was crashed in the ditch with no one around it. Contact was made with the subject's wife, who we thought was driving the vehicle. She advised her husband had a previous brain injury and has been having mental health crisis since then. Officers, with assistance of Kane County Sheriff, conducted an extensive search. It was cold, it was foggy. Eventually, the subject was located in the front yard of a residence. He had no clue where he was located at. He wasn't dressed for the weather. Once again, with assistance of EMS, he was transported, and his wife met him at a hospital. On December 27th at 4:30 a.m., officers were dispatched to the area of Burlington and Bolcom Roads for a subject that was walking in the middle of the road, almost being hit by vehicles. Officers located an elderly male subject, confused, who did not know where he was located. Officers were able to find a number for family, contact the family. They advised that the subject, who was elderly, has Alzheimer's disease. The subject was transported by EMS to the hospital where his family met with him and was reunited. Last week, Officer Sina Stavi and Officer Bialis Amanda responded to a residence in town for an autistic juvenile having a mental health crisis. The juvenile is 15 years old and he's extremely large. He's bigger than what I am. So they both responded to the call. When they arrived at the call, he was having his mental health crisis. EMS responded to the scene. During this, the subject began punching holes in the wall, put his hand through a glass mirror. Both Stavi and Amanda did an excellent job. They were within their means to use a taser on this situation because not only was the juvenile at risk, but first responders and his parents were also at risk. They did not. They used the least amount of force possible, and they were able to control him by controlling both of his arms. EMS once again assisted, and they were able to transport him for a mental health violation. Stavi injured her ankle on that, but fortunately nothing was broken, and she was back to work. During the month of December, the police department responded to 36 calls for service involving mental health issues. These mental health issues also included substance abuse, suicide-related calls, and missing persons. Mental health calls are out of control in this country, and they get worse every single day. So mental health calls have a huge liability for police departments, for the public, for the people that are involved. So I'm extremely proud. Over the last 3 years, we've put a lot of time, effort, and finances into training all our officers on mental health calls. And it shows in how they handle these calls. You can turn on the news every day, and you see these calls go bad. You see people get shot. You see people get hurt. Like, that is a risk in dealing with mental health calls. You have to weigh the risk to everyone involved, the first responders, the person going through the mental health crisis. It's a lot for an officer to process. So for our officers to handle just a couple of these calls the way they do says a lot. So tomorrow I'll meet with Kane County Health Department. They're now offering additional mental health training for police departments at no cost. So we'll take that on. So the reason I gave you this big novel of calls here is to put into perspective how bad the issue and the pandemic is with mental health calls and the risks associated with it. This board has been excellent always in providing like the training, the resources, the revenue for our police department, and it pays off in the long run. So that's a kudos also to the board for their support for the police department. So it's a lot, but the officers do a great job, and we'll continue the training because the calls aren't gonna go away. The calls are only gonna continue to get worse. Last Friday morning, and I've got numerous calls and emails on this. Last Friday morning, North Central Narcotics executed a search warrant at a residence on Campton Hills Road. The search warrant was conducted in part to a 2-year investigation by our agency, and I want to thank North Central Narcotics for their assistance. This is the same residence, if you remember me, it was about 6 or 7 months ago that I sat in this meeting and gave you guys the exact same update. North Central Narcotics served the search warrant at that time on the exact same residence again. The owner of that residence was out on his pre-trial fairness release. So when they executed the search warrant this time, once again, they found a large amount of narcotics. They found firearms in the residence. 4 people were arrested, including the homeowner. He's currently in jail for violating his pre-trial release conditions. So once again, I want to thank the department. This has been a long investigation. It's still open and continues, but also a big thank you to North Central Narcotics for their support and assistance because they have a manpower and the resources to do these types of things. So a big thank you to them. And then finally, this Friday, I will take part in the 2 Good for Drugs graduation at both Belgraham and Wasco School. Officer Harvey has taught that with Derek Bond, and it's been great as usual. So just a big thank you to them, and I think that is everything.
All right. Any questions or comments for Chief? Kim, go ahead.
I do. As always, thank you for you and the department and the officers for your fine work. I want to call out a good kudos to Detective Oberth for not only from the technology committee, I'm going to talk to him, but I'll talk as the previous chair, that the utilization of our Microsoft tenant, that it's being utilized for more than just email. So I feel good that we're just not using it for email. That's it.
Thank you for your great leadership too, Chief. It's very admirable. Frank, did you? No? Janet, go ahead.
I guess it's, mostly a question to start with. Chief can clarify for us. The village does not have any mental health resources, particularly of its own. So other than the work that, the good work that your department is doing to fill this void, we don't have a mental health department or a public health department or anything like that, right? And so it feels to me like there's a bit of a, not just a hole, but maybe a gulf between what we can do without any of those services within the village and where the county and state resources lie. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and it's a good point, and I'll give a kudos to them too on this. So Kane County Sheriff's Office, they started a unit, social services unit, which is pretty amazing. They're obviously extremely overworked, but they are sort of our go-to when we have this type of stuff. They don't charge us. They'll go any agency in the county. They do send out trained specialists that will help on mental health calls. They'll even come out for, like death notifications and that, so they have the training. So we are fortunate, but we sort of face the same dilemma on that a lot of smaller agencies do, because like it would be great, to say like, we have our own department, mental health psychologists who can go out there and handle it. Financially, that's not possible, but we are fortunate to have that resource from Kane County that does help us with it. And to the mental health point, we have been great on the officer part of it because it gets overlooked sometimes. And we started the program, I think now it's been 2 years, where we do have our own department psychologist. Once a year, she comes out, she does the evaluation of every officer, wants to make sure they're good, they're fit for duty, which is great. And then she's also available 24/7. So I have a policy that was enacted last year. If an officer is on any call that I deem a critical incident, the officer is removed from the street. They can't work the street again. They're paid. They're not being punished. They can't work the street again until they meet with Jada, our department psychologist. She speaks to them, and we determine that they're good. Because police officers, especially after doing this job for so long, as many first responders, you get thick skin, and everyone wants to say you're good, but deep down inside, not everyone is good. So it was great that we started this program for our officers in the department.
Thank you for your leadership.
Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to commend you for taking the lead on this and our officers, because obviously there's a movement in parts of this country to defund police because of situations like this and send social workers in. But I think we all know that these can escalate into very dangerous situations. And I think you and the police force here are great proof that police officers can handle those situations in a relatively peaceful manner without it escalating. So I commend you and the department for what you're doing.
I appreciate it. And to your point, like, I will use Minneapolis as the example for this starting years ago. They went to this with defund the police. They said, we're going to get rid of police. We're going to bring in all these mental health experts. They ran that program for a year, and it went to crap. Because to your point, they are not trained law enforcement. Do they offer a great service? Do they have a specialty that some of us don't have? Absolutely. It has to be in conjunction. You can't send someone in that has no protection to say we're just going to respond to 911 calls because we think we can handle it. It just doesn't work. It has to be a partnership with a lot of people. So, yeah, thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay, thank you, Chief. All right, moving on, I'm going to switch around discussion items and action items. So we'll take discussion items first. Mike Millette will be, he would like to be involved in the action items, so we're going to wait for him to get here. Yes?
My understanding is that Trustee Millette would actually mostly like to be involved in item 7A, which would be the one that we're just about to run right over. So,
Well, what we can do then, we can move into closed session, and possibly if Mike is here, then we can take action items.
I don't see, I've not heard anything from Trustee Millette that suggests that he's uncomfortable with us moving forward with the action items here. And if
Well,
there
I've
was,
talked to him, and he would like to be here for the action items. So any other comment? Okay, do you prefer to go into closed session and then finish the agenda afterwards, or? Okay, if you do, motion to go into closed session.
I would like to move then that if we're going to do discussion first, that we begin with item 7B and move item 7A to the end of the discussion items.
Okay, do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Uh,
I was going to
Second by
suggest that
Frank,
myself.
a roll call? All in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, moving on to discussion items. We'll start with B, intergovernmental agreement with Kane County Forest Preserve.
As part of the LaFox of Campton Hills proposed development, we have been working on an IGA with the Kane County Forest Preserve regarding the potential proposed purchase of land mostly north of Mill Creek, all of the land that will be remaining open space and part of the Forest Preserve. So we had anticipated maybe by tonight having that up for approval. The agreement's currently back with the Forest Preserve's attorney, just on some minor changes that the village has suggested. But to give you a brief preview of what the agreement discusses, it talks about the Forest Preserve's anticipated uses for the land, maintaining it as open space, passive open space mainly, and some guarantees that there won't be any, if there was a disconnection of the land, so that it would no longer be within the village, that it would be maintained as open space, and that it would not disrupt any of the contiguity to the areas that are already within the village as of the current annexation for the recent project. So we hope to have that finalized pretty soon. Could be at the next meeting. The changes that the village made were somewhat minor, and we've had some good discussions with their attorney. So.
Okay, any information on the land swap with Campton Township?
Right, so as part of that, that acquisition by the Forest Preserve, they entered into an understanding with the Campton Township so that Campton Township would convey the area south of 38 that is currently owned by the township and maintained as open space to the Forest Preserve in exchange for another parcel of land that would be purchased by, or at least swapped with the Forest Preserve. And the township did hold a special meeting, which is required under the Township Act, of the electors, which is anyone who lives in the township and can, by a show of hands or a casting of votes, agree or disagree as to the sale of any land that is owned by the township. And that passed unanimously. It was a month and a half ago or so. And so the Township Board and then subsequently the Forest Preserve District Board have agreed to that land swap, assuming that the village, or that the Forest Preserve can purchase the land south of 38th from Shodine when it's purchased from North First. So,
Okay, any questions for Carmen? No, go ahead, Janet.
I think some of us have always had some concerns about the Forest Preserve District's apparent desire to maintain an opening to disconnect this property. And so, I don't understand why they would want that, and perhaps you can, give us some information on that. And B, to the extent that anybody has explained to me previously why they would want that, I feel that we've done everything that could possibly be done to give them comfort to understand that they don't need it. So why are we still talking about it?
right, I think it probably stems, or it likely stems from the Forest Preserve's desire to keep all of their properties, or the majority of their properties, under the same types of holdings. So the
Well, they don't
majority
have
of,
that today.
and they don't have that today. So I think
So why would we be the poster child for that?
Right, and so that was their initial ask, I don't want to say that was the initial ask. I think there might be a desire by the district to, if they acquire new land, that it not be within the confines of a municipality. If it is within a municipality, certainly they have to navigate that relationship. the way that the agreement was originally presented to us, it indicates that the village agrees to cooperate with the district if the district desired a disconnection. The edits that we have proposed to the district is that, if there was a disconnection, it wouldn't render any parcel non-contiguous with the village, that it would not create an island of village territory with unincorporated territory around it, or eliminate contiguity with the proposed PUD. But also, we also have added language with, in principle at least, the Forest Preserve has, in our discussions with their council, will agree that the property will always be maintained as open space in a conservation use, and that for into perpetuity. There was some initial concern that there might not be a zoning district in the zoning ordinance that would meet this land use. In my opinion, the OSP, the Open Space Preservation District, completely fits that. And we've even had some discussions with the Forest Preserve's district's attorney that if there were not satisfactory language in the zoning ordinance regarding a specific type of use in the OSP district, that we could consider making an amendment to the zoning ordinance to include that and to more clearly describe that forest preserve types of properties is something that the village anticipates in the OSP. So those conversations are ongoing, but that specific issue is not something that we had to trade edits on. It was really on the one was on the disconnection, which I think we've gotten past. The other was regarding the zoning district designation, which I think we've gotten past as well.
One more?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it sounds like we've gotten past it in that we've kind of agreed to let them disconnect maybe sometime in the future, which I don't like at all. We already have 2 forest preserve properties, in the large scale within the village, and one is worse than the other. Pick one, right? And the other one's worse than the other. And they've been used by owners that are contiguous with those districts to lever their way out of the village over and over and over again. So Prairie Lakes would not be disconnected from the village if they didn't try to lever off the Great Western Trail, which is Forest Preserve property, even though it runs all the way from beginning to end through the village. We've had people that have, on Anderson Road, that have levered their way out of the village, right, based on their contiguity with Forest Preserve, properties. So I'm not really nuts about allowing more Forest Preserve property that is disconnected from the village within the village. And I would suggest that the Forest Preserve needs to actually put their cards on the table as to what it is they actually want and what it is they're actually concerned about. Because they don't actually need to be, unincorporated Kane County in any of their properties. What they need and what they want is to be able to have certain types of jurisdiction within those properties. And certain other municipalities have denied them some of those jurisdictions. And so wouldn't it be much better for everybody if we said, what jurisdictions do you want? Are we willing to give those? Yes, maybe we are, probably we are, right? And so you can have those jurisdictions on this parcel that is in fact Campton Hills today. And I don't understand how it could possibly be in the interest of the village to be having conversations about how and if and when the Forest Preserve District is going to disconnect almost 500 acres from the village. That seems like an enormous defeat for the village in terms of what it is that we're trying to craft here, and I don't know why we have that conversation at all.
So we've had significant discussions with the Forest Preserve Districts Council about the authority that the Forest Preserve would or desired to have over the property. And that ranges really in a couple areas. One is building authority, building enforcement authority and permits for new construction. The Forest Preserve District Act allows for, the Forest Preserve Act allows for that, and specifically in statute. So that is something that they don't have to ask. And that's been, you know, we fleshed that out a bit, and it's been written into the proposed agreement at this point. The other issue is zoning authority. And initially, there was a request that zoning authority would lie in the county. That, you know, that has been a point of discussion, which I think, given the fact that we have indicated in the agreement or proposed that it would be an OSP district, rather than have some other type of designation such as PUD, there's been more understanding and at least more positive discussion, let's say, about the property remaining in the village. Because even though the village would still have zoning authority over the property, because it's a statutory authority, it's a police power that the village can't contract away, unlike building authority, which is already written in the Forest Preserve Act, that has, you know, at least from my understanding, is starting to give the Forest Preserve an assurance that the village is not going to try to change the zoning on the property or restrict the types of things that the Forest Preserve would already want to be able to do with the property, which is maintain it as open space.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. There's Kane County Forest Preserve on the east side of Brundage Road. So other than Brundage Road dividing the two, they are contiguous. And I think that's part of the reason that they would like to just have really total control of what they can do on the Forest Preserve property. And I think what we're just trying to do is stop them from possibly putting a big soccer field in or something, you know, with lights or a big baseball field. So I have 24 years of history with the Kane County Forest Preserve, and they have done amazing things in Kane County. And they keep adding on to their properties anytime they can, if any properties surrounding are for sale. I just think they've done an outstanding job. And I don't know of any Kane County Forest Preserve on Anderson Road. Is that, where on Anderson?
I misspoke, Town Hall Road.
Oh, okay. All right, any other comments? No? Nothing else? Okay. Intergovernmental agreement with Blackberry Township?
So this is
Carmen?
another piece of the planning for the Fox Campton Hills development. We, similar to the Geneva School District donation agreement that you saw, probably been a couple months now, there's an agreement that's in the works with Blackberry Township that just some final edits went over to, that I actually reviewed today. I think we're very close to signature on that. The village will be a signatory to that agreement, but it functions somewhat similar to the Geneva School District agreement, except the village doesn't have individual obligations for any payments. None of the payments will be coming from the TIF fund. So this is just simply a per residential unit payment that's made by the developer to Blackberry Township. So you should see.
Much like our impact fee is to us.
Right, and you should see this probably on the next agenda, assuming that everything is agreed to in the next coming days. So.
Any discussion on that? Any questions? Okay. We'll move on to informal review, potential future annexation and developments.
Yes, we have been, or staff, which is myself, been approached by two different landowners. Well, one's a landowner and one is a developer that's getting a letter of intent with the owner to represent. They'd like to do both well and septic type development. And they just want to know that the village's plan does basically, and zoning allows well and septic on it, and if there'd be any concerns or issues, they'd have to, besides the county stormwater and the health department for their leach fields. And that the village would be predisposed to welcome them into the village if they wanted to annex their property and build at a density of less than 1 per acre. They'd obviously be a 1.5 to 2 acre and a half, depending on the lay of the stormwater and/or how they set up their property. And I just told them, the only thing that the village would definitely probably be requiring is that they demonstrate that their sinking of wells would not have any adverse impact on the existing village. And both parties said that they would be going at a depth that would be in a different aquifer than most of the 500 to 750 existing wells. They'd be going closer to 1,000 feet in both these cases. And that they would demonstrate and be willing to stipulate that they're going to go into an aquifer that would not, and demonstrate that with a study, that they would not be impacting any wells in the existing village.
So will they be sharing wells if they're going that deep? It's
Yeah, I
very,
would think
very
that I
expensive
would
to
think-
go 1,000 feet down, yeah.
That 800 to 900 feet is a different aquifer in most cases, but they are willing, and they both have some preliminary knowledge that water is somewhat brackish at the 400 to 800 feet in these areas, and that they know they're going to have to go deeper. They might have 4 or 5 parcels share kind of a well, but they're not going to do a community well with a water tower and a water treatment facility or any kind. It's still going to be much like what the village, other than Fox Mill or Prairie Lakes, has traditionally been built out here. So they're in the future planning area, so they're not actually in the village, and they'd want to annex in under those kind of conditions. I said I will get a kind of a consensus from the board that I can assure you that well and septic is a preferred low-density development, and that the village would treat them accordingly, and they'd have to demonstrate there's no impact to the wells of the village.
I still think a water study on that parcel should be done.
Yeah, they both were willing to demonstrate whatever method we asked for that they would not affect the
That's
existing
good.
wells. So I just wanted a consensus to still work with them to bring them forward at a future date.
Frank, go ahead.
How big of a area are we talking about?
One is 130 acres, and the other one is significantly larger than that. And the 130 acre is probably 55, roughly, homes. The other parcel, he's in negotiation with a landowner that may only, give him 200 out of the 450, for instance. So he just wants to know that, yes, if he's successful in that letter of intent with the owner of the property, that he'd be able to come forward to the village and be received positively.
Is he putting homes on the 200 acres?
He hasn't said the number of acres yet, because he's working out
Yeah.
that LOI and doesn't
Because
want
that's
to.
new information.
He doesn't
yeah.
want to put the acreage down because he doesn't want to give away the site,
Oh,
because the landowner wants a little, it's contiguous to the village, so they
Well,
wouldn't.
upon annexation, we'll just have to take a deeper look
Yeah.
at that.
Well, but they don't want to go forward and spend a lot of money if the village isn't predisposed to say, yes, that's the kind of development we want. And I think from our zoning and our comp plan it is, but I don't want to speak for the village without getting a consensus from the board.
Okay, Janet, go ahead.
I think it's exactly the type of development that we wanted. If we could have achieved low-density, low-impact development in the Fox and gotten, 400 houses instead of 900, we would have. So we've understood for a long time that development is going to happen. We're just trying to moderate it the best we can. So any type of low-impact, low-density development is something I'm willing to consider.
Anybody on this side? No? Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, I would have to agree with the low density. My only concern is that we make sure that they do the aquifer, the water
Absolutely.
studies, leach field studies, obviously, stormwater. What else is in there? Topography. I mean, I could go list on and on, but we want to make sure that there isn't any negative impact to not only to our current citizens, but our other neighbors.
Absolutely, yeah. Nick, go ahead.
I'll just make a brief comment. It's exciting to hear that two developers at the same time have looked at the market and have decided that they can get a good return on putting in these estate-type homes on well and septic, acre and a half, 2+ acre lots, and that they can take on a project like this. And it's super positive for our comp plan that we just approved and kind of the vision that we have for the village to see two different developers at the same time interested in working with us within that conservation-style neighborhood. So I think it's very positive.
Yeah, I'm in favor as well. I just want to make sure it doesn't affect any private wells that are currently existing, which it has happened in the past, so. Anybody else? No? Okay. So we'll move on to 7E, audit material for February 4th. Is that the right date? Because I thought it was.
Actually, they've agreed to do Tuesday night so that you won't have to, as a board, come back 2 nights in a row. They'll come at 6 o'clock on the 3rd.
Okay, it is the 3rd
It's,
then.
yes, that, initially it was gonna have to be the date was the 4th that they negotiated with Treasurer McPhillips 2 months ago, but I asked them for the 3rd, and they've adjusted their availability, and they will come at 6 o'clock for a committee of the whole with the Finance Committee, who's been invited, and I don't know how many are going to show up. I can't
I
confirm that.
think John Olson he'll be attending.
Yeah.
He-
And the other 2 may have business out of town, we don't know yet.
Okay,
6 o'clock would be the start time.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock
Okay,
for the committee of the whole, and 7 o'clock the regular meeting
on the 3rd.
on the 3rd.
Okay. All righty. We're waiting for Mike, so I think we'll go into closed session and then do action items after. So I'll take a. Yeah, well, we can do that after, I think. Okay. Motion to go into closed session? Okay, moved by Treese, second. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Nick. Roll call?
Yep, and the reasons for going into closed session, I can read them, it's fine.
Okay.
Is for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a specific employees or contractors, that's 2C1 of the statute, or and semi-annual review of closed session minutes, 2C21, and the actions considered after closed session are the ones that are listed on the agenda already.
Okay, so James will come into closed session? Yeah. Okay, sure. All right. So, actually, all in favor say aye.
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 But
Okay.
we will be coming back, and there could be action afterwards.
Well, yeah, we'll go to action items after.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.